T-minus 60 seconds and counting. We passed T-minus 60. 55 seconds and counting. Neil Armstrong just reported back. It's been a real smooth countdown. We passed the 50-second mark. Power transfer is complete. We're on internal power with the launch vehicle at this time. 40 seconds away from the Apollo 11 liftoff. All the second stage tanks now pressurized. 35 seconds and counting. We are still go with Apollo 11. 30 seconds and counting. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 25 seconds. 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. We have a liftoff, 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Power clear.
Hello, and after a long absence, welcome. Took a couple of weeks off because I'm moving and there's other things going on. But now football's picking back up, and I am in a place where we can go live. So there we go. We met all the prerequisites. Tom is here. Tom, how are you doing today?
I just got done moving, so I'm still like trying to figure out where things are going. So also in the same boat. I'm doing good. Otherwise, the Texans are back together again doing activities. We're going to get into it. It's almost football season.
Let's do it. All right. I mean, to start this without addressing the elephant in the room, CJ Stroud has finally thrown a football. So, I mean, Tom, I take it you're probably thinking about it the same way I am, but I'll ask you, what are your thoughts on that whole saga around CJ Stroud and how he might not be ready for the season because he hasn't thrown a football in the first stage of non-mandatory camp?
It was probably the biggest overblown media saga created simply because they had nothing else to talk about. I could not fathom why people tried to make it so big and had national media, local media just going crazy. Oh, CJ Stroud's going to throw a football. Something must be wrong. Maybe he had surgery. And for me, it never passed the smell test. The way Adam Schefter's out there, the way Aaron Wilson's out there, the way Ari Mairav's out there, these guys get paid to sniff that stuff out. And I think if there was anything going on with CJ Stroud, we would have known about it. I don't think that his camp, although I'm sure it's great, is better than all these other camps where they can like compress this information where you wouldn't know something happened. I genuinely believe that, management isn't going to tell you everything, but they are going to tell you enough. I believe D'Amico when he said, hey, not a big deal. Here we are. Dude shows up. And all I've seen the last couple days in mandatory OTAs has been, or minicamp has been like really, really good CJ Stroud, ready to go.
Yeah, my favorite part of this whole thing has been everyone like digging back at all the hits he took at the end of the season and being like, this is the moment when the O-line ended CJ Stroud's career. He's never going to be the same. How could they do that to him? So, I mean, it all seemed a little bit overblown. And to the effect of what you said, I mean, if there was any reason to be concerned, it wouldn't be D'Amico being like, hey, we're all good. CJ's just, getting a little rest. It would have been like, well, with whatever quarterback plays for the Texans, we will do our best to win the battle and the war, or something cryptic and ominous. The Texans are like Fort Knox, but there are tells that something is wrong, and none of those popped up in the course of this overblown story. The fact that we've been away for 2 weeks is really the only reason to even bring it up. I don't think we talked about it before it became a thing. But he's looked really good throwing it, and I think that leads into the next topic of discussion. A couple things, right? I don't like judging the O-line based off stuff that happens when they're not wearing pads. It's really tough to do that. That being said, I'm watching Jaden Higgins. Even in there's someone who posted a highlight where he didn't make the catch, and his ball awareness and just being in the air, like it was off his hands, I think, on that one, but his ball awareness and where he's at right now is reason to be at least a little excited. I'm not going to proclaim him the second coming of Nico Collins, although I will draw that comparison. What are your thoughts on Jaden Higgins so far in camp, and what are your thoughts on this comparison? I saw someone bring up DeAndre Hopkins as a comparison for Jaden Higgins. What are your thoughts?
I mean, first off, when they drafted him, it was kind of interesting because, there was no secret the Texans were after a wide receiver. I don't think anybody had this guy on their board to Houston because a lot of people thought they were going to chase some of the bigger names at the top. Ever since the draft has happened, I've seen McShay, I've seen guys in fantasy stuff that do daily and season long, and they are raving about this kid, going, this was the perfect situation for him to fall to. He was, this wide receiver that people are going to see now that they didn't get to see in college, and dude's going to ball out. And then all he did was show up to camp and show all of that. Show out. He was phenomenal. The catch he made over Kamari Lassiter, I'm like, that's not just an average ho-hum, dude over there, and he's draped all over him. And back shoulder throw, he's got to adjust to it. I mean, it's hard not to get excited about it because obviously wide receivers, the rule on wide receivers is it takes a year, right? First year, you can't really count on them to be consistent producers. They got to learn the system. They go through some ups and downs. Marvin Harrison Jr. came out, was can't miss. He struggled a little bit. I mean, yeah, he flashed, but at the same time, not to the expectation that I think a lot of people thought. So I'm trying to temper the hype a little bit, knowing that he probably won't be, a guy that they build plays around, the guy that they're going to, in important sequences. But man, in 2 weeks that we got to see him, or 3 weeks that got to see him, or whatever, I can't say enough things about how awesome this kid looks right out the box.
I mean, it's tough not to be impressed, and a reason I bring up the O-line in starting that discussion topic is that, like, in this same vein, like, I'm not going to crown him based off of what he's doing in training camp, but it is nice to see that he is showing. I heard minicamp, but it's nice to see that he's showing up in a meaningful way. It's nice to see that he's generating that buzz. One thing that I think is not being talked about enough from the highlights that happened is the fact that those throws were really good. And I don't like being that guy that's like, well, yeah, but if the quarterback didn't throw it well, what would the receiver do with it? But CJ is showing one of the big things I talked about in CJ's rookie season was ball placement being elite. And it felt like that was one of the things that suffered from lack of O-line play and CJ taking a lot more pressure was his ability to place the ball in that elite way. Pause. But he, seeing him be able to do that this early on, it emphasizes how silly it was to be concerned about his shoulder going into this stretch. And not to focus all on CJ in a talking point about Jaden Higgins, but Higgins, I thought it was interesting to see. I believe it was Dr. Barrett who made the comparison to DeAndre Hopkins, or at least he's the one who brought it to my attention. It's interesting to see because I wouldn't say that how do you put it? DeAndre Hopkins as a Texan was like, his greatness, I think, mostly lied in his ability to be, it didn't matter where the ball was, he's a ball magnet. He played with some of the worst quarterbacks that any wide receiver has ever had to suffer through and consistently performed. And I don't think the latter is going to be the case with Jaden Higgins. He's going to have the luxury of quarterback play, but and I'm not saying that Nico Collins doesn't have this, but when I compare Jaden Higgins to Nico Collins, it's like, size, body, a lot of those are the same. But in terms of Jaden Higgins, his already showing early his ability to track the ball and get it wherever it's at is a reason to be excited, at least. Speaking of being it not being hard to be excited. Nick Chubb is a Houston Texan, and I mean, it's not hard to temper these expectations, right? There's a lot around this that makes it not the same as it would have been. I think someone said it best. This running back room in 2022 would have been unbelievable, like literally the best in the NFL by a large margin. But in this year, it's exciting to see Nick Chubb sign, but I think that it's easy to temper those expectations. And I think the deal is really good, but I want to hear your thoughts as a whole on Nick Chubb coming to Houston.
I really just got to start by thanking the state of Ohio for blessing the Houston Texans with running backs. They just first they said, you know what, y'all don't need this Watson guy. We're gonna take him off your hands. And then the state said, look, we're gonna give you running back after running back. I mean, I really appreciate the state of Ohio for that. Nick Chubb, you're right. Before the injuries, I mean, this was a perennial Pro Bowler, one of the best running backs in the league. After the injuries, I think he can still be very, very good. I think that's why you got him on a 1-year deal. I think this is a Nick Caserio special. Prove it. All right, we're gonna get you where you want to go, but we're gonna showcase you, and then you'll be able to get more money elsewhere or something like that. I truly believe Nick Chubb is trying to get back in a starter's role, and he looked at the opportunity to play for a contender like Houston and said, I can go in there and showcase, and somebody will come get me. Whereas if he went somewhere where he could go start right away, maybe that's not the best fit. Now he'll get to choose. I love the deal for the Texans. When you look at some of the comparable running backs, I saw J.K. Dobbins got signed for like $5.5 million with Denver. And, he was also coming off some injuries, stuff like that. A name that the Texans fans were like, hey, I wouldn't mind. And now everything has to go right for Chubb to get $5 million. I think the base is 2.5 and all the incentives. So, I mean, it's a really, really good deal for the Texans. And I love the way Chubb talked about wanting to be here. It was interesting because he said at first, why would they want me? I don't know why they would want me. And then he was like, once I got in the room, there was a bunch of guys that just like to work just like me. It was a perfect fit. For him to say that, sign me up. I mean, that's exactly what you want to hear from a guy coming in that I love everything about the situation. And these guys are what I want to, this room is where I want to be.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that 2.5 million on a running back. So I keep saying this. I've said it a few times, but it's been a minute since we spoke, so I'll say it here. Dameon Pierce, as the backup running back for the Texans, put up like 293 yards last season in rushing. He put up a third of those yards in one run against the Titans. The support that the Texans had from the depth in the running back room was not necessarily there. So Nick Chubb at 2.5 million producing 300 or 400 rushing yards, not bad. Nick Chubb at 5 million producing near or at 1,000 yards alongside Joe Mixon is a steal. So the deal is a win-win for the Texans. It would take a lot for me to believe that the signing was not worthwhile. And even if Nick Chubb was injured early and didn't work out, it's hard not to take that chance at that price. It was reported that Nick Chubb had several other suitors and forewent them to take that deal with the Texans. He wants to be on a contender. He views the Texans as a contender. Who doesn't? And so, I mean, all in all, really great deal. Like I said, if you get the best of Nick Chubb, I mean, it's tough not to love Joe Mixon and Nick Chubb. Speaking to the running back depth, I've spoken to Dameon Pierce being the clear trade candidate. That, in my opinion, is because of the value that he has. I don't think that you get anything in return for any of the other running backs. I think that Woody Marks being a rookie and being drafted as high as he has kind of has that protection. In a way, he'd have to really not do well to warrant cutting him. I think it's between Dario Gumbawale and Dameon Pierce as to who makes the running back room outside of Chubb, Mixon, and Marks. And to me, Gumbawale's brought more value on special teams, and Dameon Pierce has more tradability. But to flip that, because I've been meaning to not make it sound like I hate Dameon Pierce, because I don't. I think Dameon Pierce is a great keep for the reason that a lot of people are concerned about Nick Chubb, which is that if Chubb goes down injured, Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce in the backfield is a lot more comforting than Joe Mixon and Dario Gumboale in the backfield, which is what you're basically choosing between, unless Woody Marks just shows up and is that guy. A very unknown commodity there, in my opinion. So I think that the Nick Chubb signing is more important and more necessary than people will give it credit for, and I believe that the Texans did right and did it well. I think they got the best possible deal. I'm going to go into some Instagram comments, but do you have anything to say about what I just said before I do that?
Well, the one thing I want to get all the way back to when we talked about the 293 yards for Dameon Pierce, I think the other thing that it's going to be interesting to see if it was an offensive coordinator thing or what is there was a huge workload that, Joe Mixon got that I think now are we going to see it more even? Is it 50-50? Is it 70-30? Like the interesting thing is like we talk about Joe Mixon and what he did, and then we talk about Dameon Pierce and what he did. Dameon Pierce, I think I want to say I looked it up. He only had 40 carries. So for all the okay, well, the production wasn't there. The opportunity wasn't there either. So if they would have given, maybe Joe a little rest and ran the guys other, Cam got some run too. So it's not just that. It'll just be interesting to see what that breaks down to for me. Like, is it going to be a 60-40? Is it going to be what's that timeshare look like? I know it's always interesting, when we talk about like the two running backs in Detroit, and guys hate playing them in fantasy because it's like you play one, the other one goes off. You don't play him, then he goes off. It'll be interesting to see what the Texans do. I really hope that this signing gives the Texans confidence that they can play Chubb more and keep both of those guys fresh, because I really think that Joe Mixon deteriorated towards the end of the season because they just depended on him so much. They're both one's 29, one will be 29. They're both, right up against that 30 threshold. So I hope that this isn't looked at in the same vein, like, oh no, he's just going to slide into Dameon Pierce's slot, and this is the run. This is the run he's going to get. I need him to get more run because it's more of a proven running back. As far as the trading of Dameon Pierce, I do believe that will happen too. He does represent value. I do think that teams are going to be interested in him. I think if I'm the Texans, I wait till the end of training camp to make sure nothing crazy happens between here and there, get everybody through healthy, and then find a suitor for him. I think also that also helps too. If somebody on another team goes down, now you have a chip to play, like, hey, you need a running back now. You didn't need a running back when training camp start. So I think they're in a great position to be able to do that as well.
Yeah, I agree with you on Dameon Pierce's usage being less. I understand that point. I will, however, counter with the fact that Joe Mixon did miss significant time. So it wasn't for lack of actual opportunity. It was for lack of properly utilizing the opportunity that was given. But that could also be contributed to the O-line in some way. And not because the run blocking was bad by any stretch, but because the pass blocking was so bad that the running was anticipated, and the scheme was also not a great fit to Dameon Pierce's skill set. And I honestly, if I remember correctly, I don't think Dameon Pierce was used in the way we thought he'd be when Joe Mixon went down. If I remember correctly, Dario Gumboale kind of took on a larger role instead of Dameon Pierce. And so it's interesting that to this point, and maybe it's just in the Texans fandom, right? But I feel like other teams around the league look at what Dameon Pierce did in 2022, and that's the only reason any running back outside of Mixon and Chubb have any trade value in the NFL is because of that. But to that effect, I agree with you. The usage will be different. I would suspect it's more of a 50-50, 60-40 kind of thing going on between Mixon and Chubb. And I think that it will change. If one of those guys goes down, we will see it shift to more of a 70 or 80-20, 30-20, whatever, a larger percentage on whichever back remains standing. But to speak to those injuries, I think that's why why Nick Chubb wanted to come to Houston. He saw an opportunity to get in a highly incentivized deal, still get close to the money that he wanted if he performs the way he does, but also not feel the pressure to be that guy from the jump. Like, there are teams that would sign him to a more expensive deal, but they would be like, okay, dude, we don't care that you ruptured your Achilles and tore your ACL twice, or I don't even remember what the specific injuries are. We don't care that you shouldn't be expected to come back from that. We're paying you a lot of money and we want you to be RB1 now. So here's 30, 40 carries a game. And that's not a situation that's beneficial to Nick Chubb getting that one final contract at the end of his career. So 1 year in Houston and getting that deal, I think makes sense. One of the reasons I have to believe that Dameon Pierce is kept is simply put, the Texans have prioritized the benefit of having high quality players as backups over trade value for a while now. The most glaring situation being having Davis Mills as the backup quarterback when they probably could have traded him for, I think, a 4th or 5th round pick at some point, just based off of how it seems he's perceived because of the experience he has in Houston. I think that if you ask most Texans fans, he's probably one of the best backup quarterbacks in the league. I'm not sure that sentiment is held league wide, but I think there's some indicators that other teams are. And it's one of the reasons why my April Fool's joke this year was that the Steelers had traded a 1st round pick for Davis Mills. I thought it was pretty believable that a team would trade draft capital, not a 1st round pick. That was meant to make it unbelievable. But anyways, let's run through. I don't have 2 screens like I usually do, so I'm sorry if you felt neglected Instagram. I'm going to go through from the top and, oh goodness, did I just back out? I think I just screwed over Instagram. I'm pretty sure they are done. I don't think that they will be seeing anymore. I think, and that was not my intention, but here we are. Or they'll probably see, I can't see the comments anymore, so I'm sorry. But shout out to Thomas Fitzpatrick. He was in the comment section. He's one of the day one Instagram followers who messaged me early on in my quest to try and establish a Texans community on Instagram, and said he liked my stuff. So shout out to you, dude. If you're still seeing this, like I said, lost the feed there. So, oh well. I guess we'll carry on this. That was yeah. R.I.P. to Instagram. I should probably pull out my phone and check on that at some point. But let's keep the conversation rolling. Um, Looking around, obviously we've talked about Jaden Higgins. We've talked about Stroud. The focus is on offense. What do you make of the way the offensive line performed? I know I mentioned earlier I don't put a lot of weight on it because it's not in pads. Seth Payne, former NFL player and defensive lineman, backed me up on that. How do you feel about the offensive line this early, and what are you getting out of like personnel groupings or what's going on, if anything, from that part of the ball, which seems to be the missing link to the Texans doing well this year?
I don't know how anyone can talk about anything offensive line because they're not allowed to really do anything. Like for me, I think that you can't touch quarterback. Guys are going to come free. Like I don't see how we can even evaluate them at this point. Like there's nothing there. Once they get padded up, once they can actually rush the quarterback, I mean, then maybe we can make some sort of assessment. To me right now, to talk offensive line, it's just to do it. I guess it's right up there with, the shoulder that we're not throwing. Oh, what's going on? We're not throwing. For me, the offensive line's in the same boat. Until they get padded up, until, there's actually tackles happening, I don't see how we can evaluate that. That is that position group. 7-on-7s, offense, defense that way, that's a different story. But offensive line, defensive line, I don't know how you evaluate them like this.
There's obviously a little more to be gleaned. And in general, right, I feel like offensive linemen are generally already at such a disadvantage with pads on in terms of the way holding penalties are called, the new push to enforce onside or offsides on the offensive line, which was the strangest phenomenon to see, that all of a sudden we're talking about the lining up of tackles too deep in the backfield when we already penalize offensive linemen so much in the plight of stopping anyone from getting to their quarterback. It's a miracle anyone's good at the position as it stands, but to judge them then further when they are further handicapped by not having pads on is nonsensical to me. The thing that really got me about the tweets that were coming out about that was one of the local Houston reporters was like, I can't remember if it was Chance Johnson or what. And he's just reporting what he saw, right? Like, it's not a knock on him. But it was like Will Anderson Jr. and Daniil Hunter have been in the backfield all day all up in CJ Stroud's face, and then he peppered in at the end like against the second team offensive line. I'm like, the first team's already like, okay, do we even know if they're good? And now you're like talking about how the second team did against our star pass rushers. I'd be embarrassed if our star pass rushers couldn't get to the quarterback against any of the offensive linemen at this point. So to me, it just highlights that things are as they should be at this point. I don't see any reason to be concerned. The offensive line's already concerning as it is. I'm not going to try and pile more onto that. But to me personally, I'm working out this thought process. I've put it out on Twitter a few times. I want to run it by you, Tom. I think that the Texans deprioritizing offensive line personnel-wise, based off their theory, it would appear that coaching was the issue, has opened the door to significantly gear up the offense in every other way. I'd say outside of tight end, like adding a seventh-round tight end doesn't move the needle. I would say every other position group moved up into, in my opinion, top 10 in the league at best. In running back, wide receiver, and QB is already pretty well set as long as the scheme corrects. So I'm running this thought by you, right? That the Texans think that they can get performance out of their offensive line with what they've acquired, which is not nothing. It's just not nothing relative to what they could have done. And they, in turn, got a lot of talent otherwise on offense. But how do you feel? Is that how they viewed it? Or how do you feel about that thought process in general?
I think people, and this is, I'm not talking about you, I'm just talking about in general. I really think people looked at the names and looked at where they came from and looked at how they graded and just instantly said, okay, just a guy, not good, just a guy, not good. And look at this offensive line and go, well, man, they didn't do anything to help CJ Stroud. These guys aren't guys that, and then they traded away Laramie Tunsil. What are they doing? They're going to get this man killed. And to that, I say, every year you see teams shuffle the decks. They go get players from wherever. And when the name I'm going to use is not on offense. When the Texans brought in Foley Fatukasi, I mean, I'll be honest, thought he was just a guy. Didn't think, hey, this guy's going to be a game changer. Just thought he was a guy like, oh, he's just filling a hole. And dude played really well. I think that, the guys that they went out and got fit an idea that they have. If you have the faith in the O-line coach that everybody seems to have faith in because of the pedigree and who he trained, who he worked under and so on and so forth, then if he goes and gets these guys that fits what he's trying to do, maybe those guys will be good enough. Like, yeah, they could have went out and spent top tier dollar on X, Y, and Z, but maybe those guys don't fit what he's trying to do. Yes, he could have went out and drafted the top tier dudes, first round, second round, third down. But then again, was that guy there? The guy they drafted, I think fits what they want to do. Maybe not this year, maybe, swing tackle and so on and so forth. But until I see it and go, all right, none of that worked. There you go. Exactly. Tim Settle, Mario Edwards, just guys came in here, balled out, phenomenal, critical pieces. Until I see it and go, you know what? They swung and missed. I can't say that yet. I haven't seen them line up against anybody yet. Laken Tomlinson, I know the name. He was good for a period. Some of these guys are probably a little long in the tooth, but again, I think fit is important with any grouping like D-line, O-line. I think fit matters. So, we talked a lot about Shaq Mason last year and where he used to be good and now he's not good. Maybe the fit wasn't there. So now I'm really hoping that the guys that they brought in are guys that are going to fit what they want to do, understand what they're asked to do. It simplifies everything because they're now put in roles to succeed, as opposed to asking a guy to do something that they couldn't or didn't do very well, which we saw plenty. I don't have to name the certain tight end that, was constantly put in the bad position. And it was like, oh, he should be able to do it. No, certain guys just don't put them in their strengths, not their weaknesses. So we'll see what happens. For me, I'm always going to be more of an optimistic guy. I really hope they're great. And we're looking at that offensive line going, hey, you need to resign this guy. You need to resign that guy because we got him on the cheap. We got him on 1-year deals.
Yeah, I agree that a lot of people looked at it, and to be fair, some of those people backed up their opinions with PFF grades, which, as we know, are not the primary source of any information. They used relativism to Kenyon Green. They were like, well, we literally went out and acquired two of the only offensive linemen that performed worse than Kenyon Green per PFF at run blocking or pass by. I can't even remember what the statistic was. I have my doubts, right? I'm not a go watch film, you don't know ball kind of guy, but I'll be the first to tell you I didn't watch those guys play. I can't give you an eye test relative to a PFF grade, and I won't throw a PFF grade at you as the only reason that a player is not worth anything. So, in my opinion, they did what any decent team would do. Let's look at Nick Casario's history. Drafts, Kenyon Green really high, doesn't work out. His history of drafting and acquiring offensive linemen has not exactly been the best. He now elevates Cole Popovich, brings in Nick Caley. You have to imagine those guys had a hand in picking out these offensive linemen. I don't know, man. I mean, if you trust Cole Popovich, you have to understand that Jake Andrews came in off waivers from New England and is now viewed as the starting center for everything we've gotten from the Texans. A guy who Cole Popovich coached at Troy back in 2022 for a season. And so they're bringing in their guys. They're going to work with them. And I've said it all offseason. If I'm a Texans fan, I prepare to not know the names of any of the offensive linemen in the interior moving forward. Get familiar with Ursary. Get familiar with Fisher. Those are going to be your cornerstones. As time marches on, the Texans, I believe, will continue to bring in guys for 1-year tryouts to get the best out of them on the interior. And maybe they'll decide to keep a couple guys, but it seems like they're budget shopping on the inside, and they have that much faith in Cole Popovich and Nick Caley to draw that performance out and understand how to use their offensive linemen to where they can get guys that are fit guys, that are competitive, that want to play and have something to prove. A guy like Ed Ingram, you give up a 7th-round pick or 6th-round pick to the Vikings, bring him in. Former 2nd-round pick, has the prestige to have trade value, but has not shown at the pro level that he deserves it. If he shows up and plays half decent in a league where we've got interior offensive linemen retiring at 8 and 9 years into their career left and right, this offseason has been brutal. We've lost several starting offensive linemen to retirement this late in the offseason because they just don't want to do it anymore. If you can get high-level performance out of a guy like that, move him on to his next contract. Let him retire with a different team. I don't care. This is one of those. I think a lot of people discount ends justify the means, and it's not a way to live your life, I don't think. But in this case, I think that solid guard play, solid center play on the interior justifies whatever means they use to get it. And I think that they've moved past the point of, okay, we used high draft capital, not working. We went and signed or traded for high-level guards, and those guys eventually faltered. If we have them for a year or two and they do well, we don't have to see them fail the next year. And they can go get their money somewhere else, and we can train them up. So I would be prepared for that. And I was the first person to say this. Now, the Texans did draft Ursary, but I was the first person to say guard is the primary need for the Texans. Watch them not draft one. Watch them go into the draft and not acquire a guard. I said, and that the thought process remains the same, right? I will let you know about this all the time because this is my I told you so moment. I wish I had objective quality evidence that that's what I said, because I know I said it on several Bleach Report streams, and I know I said it on here. I haven't been able to find a clip yet, but I said that the Texans, knowing how they approach this, and we have reiterated this thought process on this episode and several times this offseason. The Texans approach this offseason, and it looks like what they've indicated to the public is we did not have good offensive line play because the coaching sucked. We had internal bouts on the offensive side of the ball where our higher ups that were coaching that side of the ball were not accepting of help from guys they hired to coach those positions, and it was their downfall. We have since weeded that out. We've kept the coordinators that we think are good, and wouldn't you know it, the coordinators that are gone are the offensive coordinator and the O-line coach. We literally brought in an assistant O-line coach from the previous regime to be the O-line coach. So the Texans have clearly indicated they thought it was a coaching problem, and they think they have the guy in the building to fix it. So
Well,
with that in mind, if that's what they think, sorry, I'll let you talk in a second. Then obviously they could possibly not draft a guard because they could think that they could just fix it by having good coaching. Okay, that's it. I got to the point.
well, I don't agree entirely. I think there was more than that, and I think that's why they traded Titus Howard. I'm sorry. I lost his name because he's no longer
Laramie Tunsil. He's dead to
Laramie
you,
Tunsil.
but yeah,
Yes, he's
that's
dead
who
to
he
me.
is.
But they got rid of Shaq Mason. They got rid of pieces on this line. I think it was a culture thing. I think as much as it was the coach, I think it was a culture thing too. You had guys that were a little soft. You had guys that were finesse guys. You had guys that weren't that. I want to say I saw it on something somewhere where they were going, look, the swarm mentality is not just the defensive ideal. It's the entire team, and it's got, you know, what that means is, you know, there's a little nasty to it. There's a little, you know, I'm here to fight you a little bit, and the offensive line wasn't that. You know, Laramie Tunsil wasn't that. I don't think Shaq Mason was that. So it remains to be seen, like, if Titus Howard is a fixture long term. You talked about them not going after a guard. I think he's your guard. Every time he's been asked to be guard.
He is. He's the short-term answer at guard, to clarify. But sorry,
I mean, he's under contract for more than a short term, right? He's like 2-3 years.
He is. I'm saying he will most certainly be the Texans guard this season.
Yeah,
I can assure you of that.
And if you told me that, okay, if I have Titus Howard at left guard and I need to go get a tackle, then that's what they did. I think that what they have on the offensive line is probably more about Cole Popovich and less about, you know, names. These are guys that he wants, and it's not going to matter if it's Trent Brown or I don't know. To me, I'm looking forward to seeing it and then judging it. Right now, I feel kind of it's hard. I mean, it's an unknown. You know, like we don't know what they're going to be. Hell, we don't even know who's on the line right now. We can't tell you where they are and what they're going to do. So how can I judge them?
I think we can judge based off what they've shown us, but they haven't shown us a whole lot, so it doesn't really. It's like you ever looked up a restaurant? You're like, I want pizza. Look, this one's 5 stars, but it's got 5 reviews, and this one is 4.6 stars and has 1,283 reviews. I'm going 4.6 stars. There is 1,283 people who have confirmed that is what the rating is. I have lucked out one time and went to a 5-star rated pizza restaurant that was only rated by one person, and it's my favorite to this day. But that is aside from the point. That's just a metaphor. I agree with you. Cultures, and I've spoken to it. I know you've spoken to it. I felt like moving on from Laramie Tunsil was vital in the search. So when you troubleshoot an issue as someone who's in a highly technical field, you have to approach every angle. You can't just narrow down. If you get tunnel vision and you only address one thing, you risk not solving the issue. So the Texans determined it's coaching. They could tunnel vision in and just say it's coaching and be like, well, Laramie Tunsil's a really great left tackle. We have to keep him. But instead they go, okay, it's coaching. What else could have caused this offensive line to not perform well? Well, personnel at points didn't perform to the level they were supposed to. Was that because of scheme? Sure. Could it have also been because they were just falling off, like maybe Shaq Mason? Sure. So we'll move on from Shaq Mason. We will weed that out. Kenyon Green, could he possibly become better at offensive line? Maybe. Do we want to wait for that to happen? No, we'll get him out of here. Laramie Tunsil, he is the de facto leader. I don't think he ever went around the locker room and said, hey guys, I am your leader and this is how you behave. It's not a Will Anderson Jr. situation. Will Anderson Jr. showed up and was the way. D'Amico Ryans has spoken to pointing to Will Anderson Jr. as being what it is to be a Texan. he is a fixture in that locker room and is the leader that D'Amico Ryans wants. Laramie Tunsil, from what like I said, I haven't been in that locker room. I'd have to ask someone who's in it to confirm. This is just what my detective skills, my look from what I've read, is that Laramie Tunsil was the leader because he's the most skilled guys on the offensive line. There was not a leader in the offensive line room. There was just a best player, and everyone respected him for being really good at being the best player. His mentality, the way that he's carried himself, is not conducive, not reflective of Swarm. It was very shocking to me. I said this at the beginning of the season. I said Laramie Tunsil's been elected a team leader. It either reflects very poorly on the player's ability to pick out a leader, or it reflects very highly on Laramie Tunsil and who he is as a leader. I think it was the former. I think that showed out over time, that players just picked him because they were like, he's really good at left tackle. And we think he's older, and he appears to us as a leader. But he was not a cultural leader in that locker room, so it was very vital to get him out of there. When you pick a root out of the ground, though, you can't just pick the top of it. You can't pick the biggest piece and then leave anything left. It'll grow back up 10 times stronger. So that is why I have also spoken to the fact that I think Titus Howard could make it a season in Houston. I'm not necessarily certain that they view him as part of that problem, but he was really tight with Laramie Tunsil. There are a lot of indicators that his attitude and his way that he carried himself may have been influenced heavily by Tunsil. Can he transition from that mentality to following a leader in that room? Can he be a leader in that room? I don't know. I don't know if there's anyone that can be a leader in that room. So with that in mind, I am cautiously approaching Titus Howard's tenure as a Texan with the mentality of it's probably not long term. I need to look at. It's been a minute since I looked at the numbers to see if there's even an out in that contract anytime soon. I think it's 2 years. It could be 3. I think that if it comes down to it, the Texans have shown, and Houston Stressens has definitely pros using a lot of. I speak in metaphors when I'm really in it. But I think that Houston Stressens was onto something with the fact that, man, I turned to read that comment and I lost my thought right there. Thanks, H Texans United. You really derailed my next metaphor. Good grief. No,
while you try to
here
capture it,
you got it.
yeah, while you try to capture it, I think it's the other way around. I think Titus Howard had to get in line because so often, whether it's football or anything, seniority rules the day, right? Longest tenured dude, leader by default. Laramie Tunsil was the longest tenured dude, leader by default. Now, he played the position well. That obviously, aided that. But I think that had something to do with it. You had a bunch of young guys, and okay, we need to get behind this dude. I mean, CJ Stroud went as far as to say, he's a leader because he's been in the league and, he showed me how to be a pro, yada, yada, yada. To this point, obviously, we don't agree. That's why Laramie Tunsil is playing for another team. I think Titus Howard is now trying to seize that role. I don't know if you've seen him this offseason, but dude got in the gym. He's jacked up a little bit. I think that's obviously, like you spoke to, a room kind of without a leader. He now becomes one of the more longer tenured guys. Maybe that would be something like, hey, I needed to step up and be that dude. It'll be interesting to see if that's something that comes out of this, or if one of the guys that they picked up off the street becomes that guy. It's really going to determine if this line is good. I think you need a dude that everybody rallies behind and goes to war for, and like, hey, this guy leads by example. You brought up Will Anderson. I think it's really important. Will Anderson leads by example, first guy in, last guy out, that sort of thing. I think they really need somebody like that on the offensive line to do that as well, for guys to go, look, we need to follow this dude into battle, that kind of thing. And until we get that, you just have a bunch of individuals trying to just do just enough.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I hope and pray that it is Titus Howard. And I think that another important discussion, I've discussed this, I think, a lot of times, when you are the most skilled, you become the de facto leader. That's not to say that everyone that does that is a bad leader. There have been plenty of people who, when thrust into that position, have managed to step up to the plate and be what was needed and set that example. Not to get too far off of football, I'm currently I'm really into sci-fi books, so I've been reading Ender's Game, and I think this, if you've ever followed the story of Ender, that is a prime example of someone who, due to his skill and his intelligence, was thrust into a position very early in life of being a leader and saw what needed to happen and did it, but never really had that feeling behind him that he was that. So like it is possible to do that. And I think that Titus Howard could. And it seems like from what he said to Aaron Wilson recently, that he's ready to seize the opportunity and that he wants to step up and be that guy. And I would challenge him to do that. I think that this is his time. He, in my opinion, is the best, as far as we know, right, is the best offensive lineman the Texans have right now. That is based off of his play last year relative to the other players that were on the roster last year. That is based off of the players they brought in and the lack of known quality play at the NFL level by any of them. You could submit Cam Robinson or Trent Brown, but at this stage in their careers, I'm not sure that they are better than Titus Howard is. So I'd love to see it. I hate it. Add Titus Howard to the list with Dalton Schultz of players that I'll owe a huge apology to if things play out the way that I hope they do this season. They are both players that maybe I have been super fair with. And I do think Dalton Schultz, that if Nick Caley can adjust his scheme right, could show us what we have seen from him in the past more consistently when he's used properly in a scheme that is designed to, show him off. And I think that Titus Howard has the opportunity to seize leadership. And so I just need to see him do it. That's really my thing on that. But yeah, sweet. I don't know. Do you have anything else that you would like to speak on before we kind of bring this thing to a close? I never found that thought. I never did bring it back to my brain. So,
I mean, I can't say, I'm ready for football any more than I already do. I mean, y'all hear me. I'm a broken record, but it's hard not to be excited right now. JJ Watt in the building today. You could feel his excitement for this Texans team. I think when they interviewed him, I thought it was great that he's like, look, Houston is a football town. I mean, obviously we got to live, championships to the Astros. They're very fortunate to do that. He's like, I couldn't imagine what Houston would be like in the same, vein. So, I mean, this is probably the most complete roster the Texans have ever assembled in their history. And it's weird to say that. It's weird to feel that way. I really feel like the fan base is really like quietly confident in this team. I don't see why you couldn't be. The defense found a way to get better, and we already thought the defense was really, really, really good. I think, we're starting to see that Nick Caserio pulled some gems in the drafts, and the only thing right now that I think anybody questions is the offensive line. Every other position group across, maybe special teams, we don't know we have faith in Frank, right? But everything else just feels like, barring injury, they should be able to be very competitive in every game they're in and be a team that nobody wants to play.
Yeah, and to defend to anyone who would say that what Tom says is a stretch, I mean, to say that this is the best roster, most complete roster the Texans have assembled is not inaccurate, because the only thing that's changed is that there was slightly more confidence in the offensive line grouping that the Texans had last year, and that they've, by some miracle, managed to improve on defense, and have managed to bring offensive skill positions back to where they were, if not better than last season. That's what it is. I look at last season as the bar, and I think the bar's been reset. So I agree with that point. As it stands right now, it really is just the Texans offensive line that needs to figure it out. And I think they can. I'm optimistic about it. I'm not as optimistic as I was. Surprisingly enough, I'm not as optimistic as I was about them bringing back the same offensive line grouping at the beginning of last season as they did the previous season. But I do have high hopes for it. And I do want to ask you, on behalf of H Texans United, how bowling went last night. Did you manage to get in your Tuesday bowling sesh last night?
So I didn't last night. I got the boys with me. They're off for the summer, so we kicked it. I did the week prior. Bowled pretty well. First week of the summer league. It's funny that me and H Texans United got to talking about bowling the other day, because he posted a clip I believe it was of Titus Howard saying bowling's easy, just throw it hard and fast. And that couldn't be further from the truth. There's so much more that goes into it. The ball is so important. The release is so important. And much like the offensive line, if those things don't fit, it's not going to work. Doesn't matter how expensive the ball is or how pretty the release feels. So, I hope that he's doing more bowling because he's in good spirits and the Texans are winning football games. And I hope I've got an excuse not to bowl because I'm watching more Texan games instead of bowling.
Yeah. To Titus, I would say, football is easy. Playing guard is easy. All you got to do is keep the other guy in front of you. Come on. Keep him in front of you and push. No,
that was about as basic as he made bowling sound. I was like, come on, Titus.
Okay, dude. Okay. But yeah, on that note, we'll have plenty of time the rest of this offseason to dive into the Texans in this very complete roster. So make sure you're tuned in. Wednesday is the new day. So I put approximately 9. I put that little wiggly sign because that's how I like to say approximately. And as you could tell, tonight was approximately, Tom and I have lives. So sometimes things happen. Both have kids that we love dearly. So, but yeah, love talking Texans with you tonight, Tom. And if you want to find us, I am at James Roy NFL, wherever you get your social media, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Tom is at Third Coast Tom on Twitter, and then TC Tom1 on Instagram. And Tom is nameless on TikTok. He does not want you to know who he is. But you could find it if you just look back through the Bullpen catalog. Really,
I am not the content master that James is. There's literally no content for me on TikTok. So I would not advertise, a TikTok page. I'm one of those guys that just gets the TikTok sent to me and created it to use it to look at them. At no point in time am I starting a career, sending reels or whatever.
Don't call me a social media savant, but just don't tell that to my 500 TikTok followers either. I'm very proud of that limited group that I've gathered in my short time on that platform. It's all about Texans community. I love the invention of social media. I always dreamed growing up that I'd be able to find a bunch of people to talk Texans football with. So shout out to you, Tom, and to everyone else who participates in this conversation because it means a lot to the child in me. Not to say that I'm not still a child.
I was about to say, you're 30. Like 25 years old or something like that.
Next time you see me, I'll be 30. So,
okay.
That birthday is coming up quick. It's fun, actually. I'll tell you about it because I'm really excited about it. This weekend is my 30th, and so my wife has put together a really nice party for me. And knowing that I love football, she has put together a group of our friends to play a game of flag football, where I can only assume I will be the quarterback of one of the teams because it's my birthday and I want to play quarterback. Not because I'm the most skilled quarterback by any stretch, but I think I'll try and get a pep talk from CJ on how to do that. But
I need this to be recorded. This needs to be televised. I would tune in with popcorn, YouTube.
I need it to be too.
We need this. We need
James
Roy drops back. He looks left. He looks right. He goes deep. I need all of that.
No, yeah. One time I actually filmed my throwing motion and posted it because I was like, guys, is this a bad throwing motion? And general feedback was that it wasn't the worst, but I definitely don't look like a pro quarterback. I probably look like Darnell Dockett. Who's that guy who quarterbacks the flag football team for the U.S.? Probably closer to that than anything. No, he probably throws it better than me. I don't want to disrespect our fine flag football team that's represented us so well until the NFL could take over to win the Olympics for us. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. Texans United says, I used to listen to this podcast in 2023. Y'all made me want to start, by the way. Wow. Thanks. So we're glad that we could be part of your inspiration for that. And I also appreciate working with you. If you don't follow Texans United, you got to do it, especially on Instagram. We collaborate on breaking news stuff, and he's part of the broadcast channel I got going. For the target audience for that on Instagram is people who want to kind of know what's going on with the Texans really closely, but don't want to have to open social media constantly to do it. So it may not always be the most up to date, but it will have the information that you need to know the Texans. As always, this has been the Bullpen. Like I said, Wednesdays, approximately 9 o'clock is when you can find us. And thanks for tuning in. As always, stay classy, Houston, and vamos Texans.